Out of every game I've ever played, Terraria is the one that I consistently replay once a year or so. I've been playing Terraria since one of the very first versions, and it's only gotten better over time. Since then, there really hasn't been a game that captivated me in the way that Terraria has. I've tried many that were similar, but none of those were able to reach the same level of enjoyment, and that's where this game comes in. Necesse, or Necesse, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, takes direct inspiration from not only Terraria, but also many similar games that I've enjoyed. If you combine Terraria with RimWorld, Stardew Valley, and Minecraft, then Necesse is the direct result. The main difference with the game is that it's top-down instead of side-scrolling. I played Necesse for a few hours now, and I've reached a point where I can already come to a solid conclusion. There's quite a bit of content that I have yet to experience, but from what I've seen so far, it really makes me want to see everything the game has to offer. I should also mention that the game has been in early access since 2019, and it keeps receiving sizable content updates. From what I've seen on Steam, the dev takes community suggestions into account, and he gives people what they want. Many of the complaints in this video may even be fixed in the future, so the game will only improve over time. My goal for this video is to go over the pros and cons, and help you decide whether or not the game is worth buying. With all of that out of the way, let's jump into the full breakdown. In a game like Necesse, arguably the most important part is going to be how fun the exploration is. If you've ever played the more recent game, Core Keeper, then you'll already somewhat understand how the underground exploration works. I did have a few issues with Core Keeper feeling empty, though I feel Necesse does a much better job than Core Keeper. You start the game on a main spawn island, and by default you're given a small house with a bed and a ladder going down to the caves. There are 3 levels to every world: the overworld, the underground, and the deeper underground. You can access the underground section anytime you want by just placing a ladder on the surface. The deeper parts of the world require crafting deep ladders or finding a staircase depending on the biome. Each circular island is surrounded by water, and you steer your boat to the edge of the world to travel to new squares. Each square has one set biome, and as far as I know, you can generate as many of these worlds as you want. When underground, you'll face tons of enemies such as zombies, vampires, or massive spiders. You can find underground ruins and houses that are very similar to Terraria's underground cabins. One thing that I need to mention about these is the loot that you find seems to be very repetitive and limited. After exploring an entire underground section, you'll find multiples of every item that's available in these biomes. These are great for selling to the pawnbroker for gold, but besides that, it makes exploring entire areas a lot less rewarding. The great part about the map system in this game is you can easily find any biome type you need, and each biome has their own boss. All enemies drop map pieces, and you can craft these fragments into consumable maps that discover random areas on the map grid. Also on the map, you can find things like the dungeon, new biomes, and even villages full of NPCs. When I first started playing, I was a bit iffy about this way of doing things, but after playing for a bit, I've actually started to enjoy it a lot. There are only 4 different biome types in this game, so I could see things getting repetitive after a while when you've crafted everything you need to. To sum up the exploration, I think it works very well in a game like this. The crafting is basically a clone of Terraria, with you needing different workstations to craft different items. Everything is locked behind higher tiered resources, preventing you from skipping steps and becoming overpowered early on. You get crafting materials from exploring, defeating enemies, defeating bosses, and trading with NPCs. The enemies drop a ton of resources, and I really never had any issues getting them to drop. It's very easy to get resources for building, and if you farm enemies, then you'll always have more than enough items. After every cave trip, I always came back with way more than I needed, and I had to stow extra items in chests. The crafting is basic, but gets the job done. I really enjoy this type of system, and I don't really have any complaints about it. Games like Terraria always need to have a good combat focus in order to stand on its own. My chief complaint about the game Core Keeper was that the combat felt very repetitive and boring, but Necesse absolutely crushes that game in its combat mechanics. It's actually surprising to see how they've managed to give the fighting a Terraria-like feel in this above-view style. Many of the weapons and items function identically to Terraria, such as the magic missile type items. I do find the spear a bit wonky to use, but every other weapon felt great. They were the typical class separations of melee, ranged, magic, and summoner, with summoner being the class that I chose for my playthrough. One thing that I love is that you can kind of mix and match weapons as you choose, especially when playing the summoner class. You can even do this with magic weapons due to there not being any mana drain. All the weapons have their own unique spin, so it isn't too close to Terraria's selection. I found the boss fights to be a bit easy, though you can always increase the difficulty of the world when you're creating it. Overall, the combat is very enjoyable, and while it doesn't match the polish of Terraria, it definitely holds its own. The building in Necesse is overall simplistic, but it gets the job done. You have walls, floors, crafting stations, and furniture accessories, and that's pretty much it. The houses mainly serve the purpose of being a home to you and your villagers. This isn't a game with advanced or fancy building, so you'll mainly build with the purpose of functionality. You can definitely make your village look nice by decorating it and coming up with a good looking layout. Building really isn't my strong suit, so my stuff I build generally comes out pretty boring looking. On YouTube I've seen some great looking towns that people have built, so you don't have to feel like your creativity is stifled by the limited number of items. The one aspect of the game that I haven't really gotten into is automation. From what I've read, you're able to command your villagers to do various tasks and even organize your chests. That can go a long way in making your life easier, and in some cases making sure that you don't have to spend all your time grinding. This system in particular is where the game becomes a lot like RimWorld. It is of course a much simpler system, but it still works very well. They can gather resources, harvest crops, organize chests, and basically any sort of gathering task that you don't want to spend time doing. The game allows you to build your town as you please, so you can recruit any type of settlers that you want. I've barely scratched the surface on this aspect, as it's something that I'd rather do in a game like RimWorld, but it's there for you to enjoy if that's the type of thing you like. In my opinion, the worst part about this game is how outdated the UI looks. I'm apparently not the first person to think that though, as the developer said he's working on hiring an artist to help fix the way the UI looks. This is honestly such a small complaint, but modern UI would go a long way in making the game look like a finished product. Right now, the game definitely looks like it's in early access, though I'm happy that the dev is working towards improving that. The music in Necesse is fitting, but it almost feels like there's something lacking in the tracks. I do enjoy many of them, but they get repetitive very fast. I've seen this mentioned several times in the Steam reviews, and it seems to be a problem the more you play the game. The music in Necesse definitely isn't bad, but I do wish there was more variety. I only played co-op for a couple hours, but during that time there weren't any issues whatsoever. The bosses all scale with the players, and I'm assuming that enemy spawn rates are increased as well. What's great is that the bosses also drop loot for every player fighting, so you don't need to fight them multiple times for people to be rewarded. There isn't a lot to say about co-op since it's basically the same experience as single player, but like most games are, this game is definitely more fun when you're playing with friends. Now's the time where I give you my verdict, and with how positively I've talked about the game, it shouldn't be a surprise that I think Necesse is a must-buy. As long as you're aware that the game was made by a single developer, I think you can easily forgive its minor shortcomings. The overwhelmingly positive Steam reviews show that most people show the same sentiments. If you're a fan of any of the games that I talked about above, or you simply want to try out a new genre, then Necesse is a great one to buy. If this video helped you out at all, then definitely give us a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next video.